Welcome to MGoRadio 9.6. Going into the Minnesota game. 5. Doesn't matter. I am an engineer, which means I'm not good at math.
You're the reason we started at 0. That's why we have these problems, because we start counting at 0, and this is our it's our 5th game we've talked about afterward. Whatever.
I mean, that's what you got to do. You got an array. You want the first thing in the array. You got to ask for number 0. I'm sorry. That's just the way of the world, Seth. Anyway, Minnesota is up next. The Brown Jug game. This is an away game for the second straight week against a team that, well, I don't really know what to make of. They're not very good. We can say that. But their first week against Nebraska in a game that I think everybody watched because it was the only one on at that point, they looked like they had completely lost their identity as a football team, particularly on offense, right? They rushed for 55 yards in the game.
Yeah, they just start throwing the ball with Kaliak Manis the whole time. And my take on that, having watched Minnesota the rest of the season now, is that they are. You remember they were very RPO under Kirk Shirakwa, right? And then they went and got Harbaugh, which is PJ Fleck's guy from Western Michigan. They got him back together. So I think that both of them are very active to the defense. So if the defense is going to be putting a bunch of guys on the line of scrimmage or coming down in press, they're going to throw the ball deep. And if you're, they're going to run the ball every time you sit back.
Well, I think the issue there was more the fact that they couldn't run the ball. So they had 21 rushing attempts in that game. And I looked this up on Game on Paper. 5 of those had positive expected points. So when you're getting positive expected points on a quarter of your runs, you can't run the ball.
Yeah.
But after that game, they insert Darius Taylor, who's a freshman from Michigan, and Taylor goes off on EMU. They run 76% of the time. And then from there, they've looked more or less like a Minnesota offense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they put up 50 rushes in a lot of games. They put up 200 yards. And they were even able to do it against Louisiana Lafayette without Taylor last week. So it kind of feels like week 1 was actually a validation of the Nebraska run defense in some capacity, which is good for Michigan since they just played Nebraska. And this is still more or less the Minnesota of old on offense, with the exception of I'm just not buying into Kaliak Manis. Alex?
Neither is Alex.
Yeah. I wouldn't buy into him either. I mean, I think he's been pretty bad this season. The biggest problem for him is right now he's just not accurate enough. He's throwing a ton of marginal passes where it is way harder for the receiver than it needs to be. Obviously, we remember the touchdown catch by Daniel Jackson against Nebraska, but there was also one I clipped of their slot, Corey Crooms, against Northwestern. Similar story. He's wide open, and he makes this sprawling catch out of bounds because the pass is way too high and way too far from him, and he makes it, but there's just a lot of balls like that. And there's another one I clipped where it's 3rd and 10, and he fires to Jackson short of the sticks, but if it's an accurate pass, Jackson turns upfield and gets the first down. Instead, he has to catch it and fall out of bounds short of the first down because it's just not an accurate ball. And that's kind of the issue right now. When he throws down the field, they're not where they need to be. And as a result, he's not throwing down the field all that much. And as a whole, his completion percentage is pretty low. And so I distilled down his stats against the Power 5 teams they've played. They've played 3 of those games, and it's worse than Gavin Wimsatt numbers at the moment. I mean, it's, barely 5 yards an attempt, barely over 50% completion, and he's thrown an interception in 4 of 5 games he's played this season. And he's not reading the defense all that well, and because he's a dual threat guy, he's one of those quarterbacks that if the first read isn't open, then I'm just going to tuck it and run for it, which isn't the worst decision because of how inaccurate he is and all that. But at the same time, I think it does inhibit his ability to progress as a passer as well.
He's a guy like if you get him off platform, it's pretty much over.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there was one of the interceptions was against UNC, and it's just this little dink to span forward, but he has to move up in the pocket to get it off, and it's behind and over the head of Span Ford, who's 6'7". So it's hard to miss that guy 5 yards downfield. And Span Ford deflects it up because like you can only get like a finger on it and he gets picked off. So, I mean, in terms of talent, I mean, I think they actually have some talent at the skill positions. Like I like Daniel Jackson. Spanford is not having a good year, but he's a veteran, established Big Ten tight end who was good last year. And Taylor, I think, is the real deal. So what's holding them back? Well, I don't think their offensive line is where it was last year, and I think they've got a big drop off at quarterback.
Yeah, the offensive line, I think, is a big story for them because they're used to having a line that is not Michigan caliber, obviously, but it's generally a pretty good line that can push teams around and open up holes. And I just haven't seen a ton of that, honestly, in what I've reviewed. Even that Northwestern game, they run for a ton of yards, but on a down-to-down basis, they weren't getting a ton of push in that game. And the big runs they had were largely Darius Taylor. And that was the reason I made him the danger man in that game. They rip off 2 40-ish yard runs and 1 20-yard run. And if you remove those 3 from the 42 carry sample of the game, their yards per carry drops to 3.5. And Taylor really made a couple of those big runs himself. One of those was a touchdown run, 40-yarder. It's 4th and 1, and he's contacted behind the line of scrimmage. And he breaks the tackle and cuts outside. And obviously it's 4th and 1 with the game sort of on the line. And as a result, he's able to run for a touchdown because there's no safety deep. But that's sort of the story here. I think Taylor's really, really good. I think he brings an element that none of the other running backs have. And if he's not able to go, I just don't really see how this is happening for Minnesota because this offensive line is not getting enough push against Nebraska and Northwestern. What's it going to do against Michigan? Probably nothing.
And Taylor missed last week. He was hurt late in the Northwestern game. And this could go one of two ways for Fleck. Fleck's like, it's a home game against Michigan. We got to put this guy on the field, see what he can do. Or it's a home game against Michigan. I'm not going to risk my best player if he's not 100% because we're not going to win this game. And we could win against Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin or whoever. So,
I mean, there hasn't
Taylor's
been any. There hasn't been a peep that he's going to play. I think that's just
no. I mean,
they just haven't said
Flex,
he's not going to because they're not going to say that.
Yeah, Fleck's one of those guys that I think is just really guarded about that sort of thing. So we're not going to know till that injury report comes out 2 hours before the game.
I mean, you mean he's a football coach?
I mean, even then, they could list him as questionable.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he could give it the old Blake Corum against Ohio State, try to go say that like I'm not 100% and then kind of pack it in. And at that point, I mean, one thing I think Kaliakmanis does have over a guy like Harburg is if he's able to sit in a clean pocket, he can complete passes 10, 15, even 20 yards downfield. Like he is not complete waste of space. That's not really what I wanted to say.
I'm sorry we do this live.
He has this. He has some ability if you keep him clean, right? And so I think that given this stuff we've seen with Michigan secondary, there is some possibility that guys are out of position. They're still rusty. They're not playing up to their ability, and they're able to cobble together some drives that go somewhere. But then the other thing that Michigan has been exceptional at this year is not letting teams finish drives. So they're so good at that it's probably an anomaly.
Oh, yeah. There's only one conversion on 4th down in 13 attempts this year, and Michigan has a interception return for a touchdown on 4th down as well. So we've scored as many times as they've converted on 4th downs, and that just doesn't happen.
But I think that's something that is inherent to this Michigan defense, right? You've got Chris Jenkins, you have Braden McGregor, you should have Mason Graham back for this game. You have Kenneth Grant. This should be one of the country's best short yardage defenses. And so when you're trying to drive the field without big explosives, which is likely what Minnesota will have to do, at some point you're going to be in 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 in that kind of no man's land around the 40 or 30th, and then you're in trouble because that's not a 70 to 80% or 90% conversion rate. It's closer to 50. So this does feel like another offense that might be able to pick up some plays like Nebraska was last week, but then finishing those drives is going to be a tall order.
Yeah, I mean, can I say something about Fleck for a second here? Because
I mean, is it family friendly?
Yeah, no.
We're talking about the Minnesota football program, so that's on topic, Alex.
I think that also just on that topic, the way they blew that Northwestern game was baffling to me. And I kind of think Fleck is a scaredy cat. And I don't know if he's going to be aggressive on 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s against Michigan. Like, I want to see him do that. But they punted in that game up 7 with 2 minutes to go or whatever. They had 3rd and 1 and they get stuffed at like the Northwestern 33 or something like that. And they punted. Northwestern had no timeouts. They needed 1 yard to win the game on 4th and 1, and they punted from well inside Northwestern territory. And I just couldn't. Yeah, and do you remember how it went in the end zone?
No, I do not.
There was a gunner down there, and the gunner forgot the rules and stood in the end zone as the punt rolled into the end zone, and then was like, "Uh-oh, that was not the right thing."
Wait, that's the NFL. As long you can be in the end zone as long as the ball.
No, he was like 5 yards deep in the end zone. And he just let it roll in. Yes, you can look this play up. And the other guys on the team were like, "What are you doing? Like, come on!" It was unbelievable. But regardless of that special teams fiasco, you just can't punt in that situation. You're Minnesota. You're supposed to be a running team, have this identity. And I just don't think Fleck is aggressive enough. And I don't know what his approach will be against Michigan. But that's something that stood out.
I think if you wanted to like explain what's going on with Minnesota, the best thing you can say is they had Chuck Filianga last year. And we all remember what that guy was, right? He was just a bulldozer. Yeah. He was all right in pass protection, but he would move people. So if it was 4th and 1, you run behind Filianga.
Did they have Falele last year too? Or
yeah, I think they had him. Although their left tackle, Ursary, is not terrible. And the other tackle they have is like a Notre Dame guy who cannot pass protect.
But he's not 400 pounds. Like that's, I mean,
right.
Minnesota, like their niche is, okay, we want the heaviest offensive lineman in the country. We don't care if they can pass protect because all we do is RPO.
Right.
And it kind of feels like they don't have that road grader or 4 road graders that they need. I mean, they had a guy who was, I think Pro Football Focus is like number 2 center in the country last year.
Yeah.
And a guy who was a high NFL draft pick. And it doesn't look like there's anybody like that on this line.
No, I mean, they've got it hasn't just fallen, like especially Filianga's spot at right guard. It went from the perfect guy from Minnesota to someone who can't play to the point where they're moving him out all the time. So they haven't really decided on a left guard or on a right guard. And they kind of moved the left guard over again. But they're playing this guy Martez Lewis, who came in as a tackle. He's 6'7" or 6'8", and he does not move people the way you want them to. And that's the guy that Nebraska was just terrorizing. And you talk about Calic Manis, he gets off his remember that game, every single time Nebraska got in the secondary, into the backfield, it was coming up the middle. And when you looked at the tape, it was either coming from the center, as Nathan Bowe, or this guy Martez Lewis, who just cannot protect anybody. And like when you have your guard and the way that Minnesota wants to play offense, and he can't block anybody in the run or block anybody in the pass, like that's it.
All right, so I think we're projecting an offensive output similar to the Nebraska game here. Sounds like it.
I would say
I think that's reasonable.
I would say Rutgers game because first of all they're still running the same.
They're the
offense.
same thing.
No, they're not. There's a key difference here. It's a key difference. You remember in the Rutgers game we were getting kind of annoyed that they were throwing those passes underneath the zone coverage. I think we're going to see that again. I think that Michigan doesn't want to like match up Josh Wallace on Daniel Jackson one-on-one right now, because the only way that can really hurt you is if they get like a 40-yard pass. So we're going to play soft zones and give Kaliakmanis a couple nice things underneath, and maybe we'll try to jump one or two of them. But they're not going to want to give Daniel Jackson, who's like the one guy on that offense who can hurt you, a chance to get you deep.
All right, we're going to take a break, come back, talk about the other side of the ball.
Want the perfect game day outfit? Underground Printing has unique, great-fitting U of M apparel and officially licensed apparel from legendary Michigan names like Woodson, Howard, Ufer, and more. UGP also specializes in custom printed apparel and promotional items for groups, events, and businesses. Whether you need one shirt as a gift or 1,000 shirts for a charity walk, Underground can customize almost anything for groups large or small. To learn more, visit Underground Printing at one of our 3 convenient locations around Ann Arbor or online at undergroundshirts.com.
It's painless, it's online, it's group ordering made easy for your next custom printed apparel order. Pogo from Underground Printing will save you time and hassle, whether you're selling shirts for a fundraiser, organizing a large event, or trying to collect sizes and payment for a family reunion. UGP is here to help. Save time and hassle every step of the way with our easy-to-use site. No more guessing what to order, chasing down people to pay, or wasting time trying to sort out the order. We'll set it up and you can just sit back and relax. We can even take care of individual shipping. To learn more about Pogo, visit us at any of our convenient locations or at pogo.undergroundshirts.com.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood, founder and president of Peak Wealth Management, your MGO financial coach, and it is our goal to help you retire with peak confidence. Check us out at peakwm.com/mgoblog. Bo says the team, the team, the team. Lately, my mantra has been the plan, the plan, the plan. Check out the Trust the Plan podcast. Search out my name, Nick Hopwood, on any platform and give us a follow. You know, we haven't updated this ad in over 2 years because since the last versions went live, we only had one Big Ten loss, and honestly, I'm a little superstitious. But for this ad, I just want to give a shout out to all the loyal Wolverines and MGoBlog fans who've reached out to us from as far as France, Japan, Seattle, San Francisco, Dallas, Florida, New York, and of course all over the great state of Michigan. And you guessed it, we're pulling recruits out of Ohio as well, just like Harbaugh. Thank you very much. So no matter where life has taken you after your time in Ann Arbor, we're here to help you build a plan you can trust. If you're looking for a second opinion, visit us at peakwm.com/mgoblog today.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Chad Ruddle on the bars, yeah. So your ass ain't bored. I pray to God give what I'm asking for. I pray to God give what I'm asking.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.5. We'd like to thank our sponsors. We'd like to thank Underground Printing for starting this and making it all possible. Stop by and pick up some gear. Check them out at ugpmichiganapparel.com or check out our selection of shirts on the mgoblogstore.com. Let's not forget our associate sponsors, Peak Wealth Management, Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lendor, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Michigan Law Grad, the Phil Klein Insurance Group, Denny by 4M, Winewood Organics, Signalwire, where we're recording this, and introducing to the podcast, Sharon's Heating. All right, the Minnesota defense has also taken a step back. Last year, they were a pretty salty group. And while I am a little bit suspicious of SP Plus ratings of Big Ten West defenses, because they all get to play Big Ten West offenses.
Right. That's usually later in the season. By the time like everyone's gotten an Iowa through their system, it's just like, woo!
Well, by the end of 2022, SP Plus rated the Minnesota defense the number 5 unit in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to emphasize that Iowa was number 1, Illinois was number 2, Wisconsin was number 15, and I think the most indicative number that says Big Ten West SP Plus defense ratings are a little bit inflated is Nebraska was 61. that Nebraska defense was average-ish according to SP Plus because of
Right.
how good they got to play. So I don't think it was the number 5 defense in the country. I do think you could make it a case that it was top 10, top 15, top 20, somewhere in that range. And I looked this up on Pro Football Focus. Last year, their top 7 players all got buckets of snaps, and they all graded out as a 76 or plus to Pro Football Focus. This year, they have 3 guys in that bin, and the drop off past number 3 is pretty severe. So it goes from a 78 to a 72, and then down to a 70. So, and that's after playing 2 tomato cans and Northwestern, who they gave up 37 points to. So it really feels like this Minnesota defense is a far cry from what they were last year. They do have a couple of nice pieces in the secondary, but not a whole lot else.
Yeah, the biggest thing is they're just lacking impact players, right? They're lacking players that you look at and think this guy's an all Big Ten player. It's not like they have a ton of black holes in the lineup. It's just a lot of players that are okay. And as a whole, it hasn't come together to be super effective at this point in time. They were doing a pretty good job against Northwestern, and then it all just kind of fell apart in the back third of that game. And for me, when you look at that Northwestern game, the pass defense is really the story there. And a big part of it is the pressure. And when I look at this defensive line, they don't really have any organic pass rushers that I'm really scared of at this point in time. They blitzed a decent bit against Northwestern, but, that in terms of the defensive line itself, there wasn't a lot going on there. They have one guy, Ja Joyner, who's a guy they bring off the bench, but he's just a limited pass rush type guy, not a player you can play for 3 downs. And otherwise, if they were rushing 4 against Northwestern, they weren't getting home all that much. And the kind of images of that collapse is Ben Bryant standing around, finding a spot and delivering down the field and being able to move the ball. So that's the first area of concern, I think. And then secondly, their coverages are okay, but they're not suffocating enough, and the DBs aren't good enough on the whole to stop a quarterback who's in a rhythm from dissecting them when he's not being impacted at all in the backfield and there's no pressure to speed him up.
Yeah, and going back to the Bryant thing, he threw for almost 400 yards in that game, and he is averaging 4.3 yards an attempt in all of their games that aren't against UTEP.
Yeah.
4.3. 4.
I mean, if you watched that Northwestern Penn State game, he had 0 time to throw. And obviously Penn State's a really good defense, all that stuff. But Northwestern's offensive line got destroyed in that game. And that was, the same offensive line that was, giving him quite a bit of time against standard rushes in Minnesota. So I think that just speaks to the Minnesota defensive front's lack of anything that really scares you in the pass rushing game.
Yeah, the one guy I
Yeah.
think on this team who can pass rush at all is their weak side linebacker, Devin Williams, who they'll bring down
he's
sometimes.
a good blitzer too,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the problem is if you blitz him, you just throw wherever he used to be because they don't have, and the other linebackers can't cover that well. They like to kind of confuse you. They're very 20 teens kind of defense where they want to throw out hybrids, and Jack Henderson might come down and be a Sam one play, or he might be the free safety another play, right? And like they're trying to show you different looks and then back into a different look. But if you end up actually like getting a blocker on that guy, he's 215 pounds. If you actually put that guy against Rowan Wilson, he's going to get shot by. And like the hybridization works against them as soon as you figure out what they're doing and you hit them with the thing that they're not quite good enough to do.
Yeah, and they faced an NFL quarterback in Drake May for North Carolina, and he lit this pass defense on fire. Like 75% completion, 400 plus yards at almost 10 yards an attempt. I mean, it was brutal. And I'm not sure if J.J. McCarthy, where he ranks next to Drake May. Obviously, both are really good players, but they're in the same, they're both in discussion for the first round of the draft. So that's something I think is worth keeping in mind here.
Yeah, Henderson, by the way, is one of the 2 guys that Pro Football Focus really likes. The other one is safety Tyler Nubin, who was also very good last year. I mean,
Yeah.
the problem with Newman is that he's been targeted 5 times this year.
He's a free safety.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So,
he's a great tackler, and he gets a lot of interceptions off deflections, which is kind of a weird thing to have. I also like Ohio State really tried to go after him. That was like the scuttle on the Minnesota boards over the offseason. We were looking these guys up for Hail of the Victors. Is that like Ohio State recruited Tyler Nubin to try to like fix their secondary, and he stuck around. And like he also probably could have gone to the NFL because he had some great interception stats. He's a little bit of a linebacker-ish guy for to be playing free safety, but really like as long as you stay away from him, and I don't throw to anybody who he's on top of, even if like there's another guy there too, just you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you stare down a receiver, he will jump the route, but this is J.J. McCarthy. Hopefully he's not going to do that. So.
yeah, and their cornerbacks are just guys. I mean,
yeah, Trevon Jones, the transfer from Elon, I think hasn't fit in that well thus far, so that's a guy you could look at. Also, if Nubin or the other safety ever leave the field and that Aiden Gousby dude comes on, he got cooked by North Carolina in like 20 snaps, so that's something to watch. One other thought on this secondary too. This is a really poor tackling team. I mean, Nubin's a really good tackler, but a lot of these guys are not that good at tacklers. So that could make problems go from bad to worse, because the images for me in my head of that meltdown against Northwestern is Bryant standing in there having all day to throwing into a guy decently open 10, 15 yards downfield, and then 1 or 2 missed tackles, and he picks up 10 extra yards. I mean, the game swung against Northwestern because of our old friend A.J. Henning, not the touchdown to tie it 2 plays before. There's 20 seconds left in the game. Northwestern has no timeouts. They need to get a first down to stop the clock under 2 minutes. They check it down to A.J. Henning, and he's only 5 yards downfield on a, 1st and 10, 2nd and 10, something like that. Minnesota obviously is saying use the middle of the field. They have 2 or 3 guys between Henning and the sticks. All they got to do is tackle him, and maybe Northwestern has 1 shot at the end zone. And these 3 guys blow the tackle. And A.J. Henning wiggles by him, gets the first down. They run up and spike it. Now they have 2 plays to tie the game. So,
I think one of those guys is Darius Green, the other safety. And I think this goes back to why they can't really use Tyler Nubin the way they want to, because if Green's the deep safety, he's not making the tackle. And, you need somebody back there who's just going to give you a place to stand. And because Green's been missing that, basically they have to find a way to roll Tyler Nubin deep or trick you into throwing short, because he and Henderson, and I know that he's grading out well in Pro Football Focus, but I don't know. I think their hybrids always seem to grade out really well. And he just not strike me as a guy that, if he gets stuck with Roman Wilson, it's over.
Well, yeah, but that's gonna.
But they're putting him at high safety, so you can get that matchup sometimes.
They're gonna bracket him, right? So, but to your point, Alex, starting linebacker Maverick Baranowski, 23 tackles, 10 missed tackles. That's an incredible ratio.
Yeah,
that's pretty bad. And then
there's one clip I put in there where he against Nebraska, he meets a running back at the line of scrimmage, and the running back, I think it was the guy who got injured, I think it was Irvin, but just runs over him, just trucks him, and keeps running for 25 yards. So we could see Kalel Mullings reprise that one.
Kalel Mullings just needs to step through the ankle tackle. That is the result of trucking a guy. He'll learn to do that, and then he'll be pretty good. So, given what we saw against Nebraska, given what we've seen against Rutgers, it kind of feels like there should be more of the same for Michigan. Maybe a little bit more emphasis on the passing game because the opposition doesn't really present much of a rush threat and has some weaknesses tackling in space. So you might see Samaje Morgan get a little bit more involved. But honestly, after looking at everything Minnesota's done this season, after looking at all the stats and stuff, I'm surprised this is like a 17-point spread, or 18, I guess now. But
yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable, because you look at that Nebraska game. Were they better than Nebraska in that game? I don't really think so.
No,
it was not a good showing from them, and that was before Taylor, sure, but we don't know if Taylor's playing in this game. So, and you just look at this team and their body of work. Not a great showing against Northwestern. They got thoroughly beaten by UNC, and it just doesn't look like a very scary team to me. But I do kind of, at least on the spread point, I do kind of think this is going to be another Rutgers game in terms of both these teams love to run the football. Like this could be one of those 24-3 games where it is over in 2 hours and 35 minutes because it's nonstop running. So that may keep the spread closer, but I just struggle to see a way that Minnesota is going to stay in this game. They just don't have the horses to hang with Michigan.
Yeah, this is a late night game. Like by the time Michigan gets up 21-0, Minnesota's got the rest of the season to care about. Like it's going to go quick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I do think that Nebraska game went pretty quick, though. That was not a 17-point spread.
That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, they had a turnover on their second drive in their own territory. That kind of inflates things sometimes. So,
good thing Kaliakmanis has avoided the turnover this year.
I guess the one thing that you would say is they do have 8 interceptions, and while 3 of those were from Jeff Sims, and that has to be graded on a curve, they did pick off Drake May twice. Henderson had one of them excellent play where he ran under an out route in a way that I didn't think he was going to get there until he picked it off. So that would be key. Like, don't have a Bowling Green part 2, and I think Michigan is good. One final note, Minnesota is very boringly average at special teams. So,
well, they got a kicker named Dragan, who's got to be our Dragan Kecic, who's got to be our name of the week. And then they have your stereotypical Aussie punter, Mark Crawford, who's not getting
mediocre
returns. Yeah,
they've done nothing.
They're actually ranked 122nd to Pro Football Focus on special teams right now. I don't know if it's too early in the season for that, but yeah.
See, I look at FEI for that stuff because it's really just like, did you punt from this spot, and then where did you get it? We're going to rank you based on that. So
yeah,
they're dead average in FEI.
Yeah, we used to have that slap stat. I got to bring that back. The starting location after punt.
We're going to take a break, come back, and discuss the Nebraska game for one last time.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood, Certified Financial Planner, founder and president at Peak Wealth Management. Check us out at peakwm.com/mgoblog. When you're watching the game, everyone knows what the score is. But you might be at halftime of your career. Do you know what the score is? Are you winning, or do you need to play catch-up? If you're behind in the second half of your career financially, we may need to run a hurry-up offense like John Navarre in the 2003 game at Minnesota, or run a three-quarter court press after a made free throw like Coach Howard likes to call. My team of CFPs at Peak Wealth Management are here to help you understand what the score is and what you need to do to win. Your spreadsheet doesn't tell you the score like we can. If you're going to spend all your free time watching replays of the 2021-2022 Ohio State games on repeat, you need to outsource your financial planning and investing with us at peakwm.com/mgoblog. At Peak, our goal is to help you retire with peak confidence.
Passion for e-commerce. Sell stuff online. Security. Performance. Conversion. Beautiful user experiences. Belle experience utilisateur. Monthly marketing. PPC SEO. Make your user a customer. Conversion. Eau de Parfum for online retailers. Love your website. Let Human Element show you how. Available at human-element.com and Fine Department Stores, not Fine Department Stores.
Hey, so I have like insurance and stuff, but I don't really like know what's going on with it.
Yeah, your coverage probably sucks, and you're paying way too much for it. And I know this because I had a guy. His name's Phil Klein. He's actually a Michigan alum and wrestled for Michigan. He looked at my insurance and he's like, "Yeah, your coverage sucks, and you're paying a lot more than you need to for it."
I also I hesitate to even mention this, but I do have my insurance from a company that advertises during college football games. Well, and I wish that was not the case.
Well, why don't you just get it from a cool guy who actually reads MGoBlog?
Well, how would I do that? They have a website?
They have one of those too. It's philkleininsurance.com. Can you remember the name Phil Klein?
Sure.
Can you remember insurance?
Yes.
Okay. Use those two together, and you will save money on your insurance, and you will actually get better coverage on your home and your auto, and they do life too.
All right. So you're telling me if I Google Phil Klein Insurance, this website will come up?
Yes.
Wonders never cease.
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness for adults 21 and older. They're a grower, processing lab, and dispensary rolled into one, cultivating and producing flower, old school hash, edibles, CBD products, and more. You can find them across the street from Kroger on South Maple, just west of downtown, and at winewoodorganics.com. Veterans and MedCard holders save 10% on all orders, and first-time customers save 25% as long as you're not wearing scarlet and gray.
Now we all to the races. Got a little hungry, so we went to the coney, was in line for like ages. Then I got to the front, but to tell her what I want, said I might as well save it. Cause we probably can't make it. We ain't got no eggs, pancakes, no hash brown sausage, or no bacon.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.5. I know I told you we were going to talk about the UFR, but instead, it's Greg Dooley, because it's Jug Week. There's nothing that Greg Dooley loves better than talking about the little brown jug. How you doing, Greg?
Doing great, man. My life's changed since we last I was on radio. You know, I'm teaching now at U of M. It's quite a wild thing to be kind of paid a little bit, but to talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And actually to actually have half a lecture about the jug, and then I'm writing a test on it, so it's kind of wild. These poor students, they didn't know what hit them. Like, I show a forensic, the master potter from the Henry Ford Museum who inspected the jug for me back, years ago. And they're like, oh my God, what did we get into here? So
yeah.
It's fun.
So, I mean, we've heard a lot of the stories about the time the jug was stolen and then possibly replaced and its origins. Like, I'm dealer's choice. What do you want to get into?
Sure. Well, first off, you may have heard like Harbaugh on his coach's show revealed. I didn't know if it was like top secret or not, but I actually got invited into fall camp. This is public now. And what the team did in fall camp is they have like an opponent preview, where the coaches, they do a mini scouting report on the opponent, and they do some other off-topic cultural thing. And obviously for Minnesota, they had me come in, and I actually gave all of the football players, I think it was around 20. I lost count, although Harbaugh said almost 45 minutes. I gave a pretty thorough breakdown of the jug history, including the funny stories, which I can mention a few, but it was really cool. In fact, they had the jug out in the team room, and all the coaches were there, like assistant Ben Herbert, like everyone was there. It was really cool. And Harbaugh himself asked a few questions. It was wild. So that's something I've never done before, and that was something we did back in August during camp. It was really cool.
So we're not going to have a repeat of 2015 where the players go over and start jumping around with the jug before someone comes in and is like, no, hey guys.
All right. Well, so here's the thing. So Michigan has a trophy case version, which isn't the real thing, and I don't think that's uncommon with some trophies, but we've never really used it at a game. And I actually told a few people there, I go, why don't you just put nobody knows, of course, okay, nobody except for a few people know the difference. Why don't you just put this old looking other jug out there? Because someone's going to drop it one of these days. So we'll see. If you see one with ribbons on it and things like that, it's not the real jug, but I think that's okay because someone's going to drop it.
Wasn't it Chase Winovich
yes.
who almost destroyed the little brown jug at 1 year?
So here's the full story. So I guest lectured in the class I teach now, which is the history of college athletics. Of course, what was my guest lecture? We were playing Minnesota. So I think it was Bruce Mate. He had me come in. Chase is in the class, and I do a different version of the jug history, right? And I end it with, which I did also with the current team. Make sure you hold it with two hands. Do not. And I show pictures of guys like Woodson, Hank, Woodson, he's not going to drop it. But Taylor Milan, I'm a little more worried, right? So he does this after the game, and the photos are hilarious. Haha. He runs up to the student section, and he thrusts it up in the air with one hand. And And he's in my lecture like that week before. So I tweet at him, dude, what are you doing? He tweets back at me, thanks, Dooley, you gave me the idea. He trolls me on Twitter. And then he adds one. He goes, this is my favorite one. And it's it's one of the photos. This is all true. This is absolutely true. So I actually, when I met with the team this time, I kind of like, do I do the two hands thing again? Because it really backfired last time. But it was fun.
I don't know if there's anyone on this current team who's quite Chase Winovich in terms of personality. So I think you would have been okay.
Okay. Now, if Mason, I don't know if it's been announced if Mason Graham is for sure going to be there, but if he might, he's probably going to have a club on his hand, and so young Mason, I would like him not to try to carry this thing with the club, although he probably would be fine. But there's a ton of stories. I mean, one of the things that Harbaugh really liked was I kind of do that forensic analysis. Is this the real jug from 1903 that we play today? And there's a ton of evidence to suggest it at least dates to the 20s, photo evidence and other things, right? My favorite story is probably when it got stolen, and it disappeared we just had it in a trophy case in the 1930s, 1931. And I assume pranksters or somebody just went in there and took it. It was the Depression. There wasn't a lot going on. No one was going to football games, as Seth knows. Mm-hmm. And so someone stole it. And then right before the week before the game, another jug shows up, or a jug shows up at a gas station outside town, which is now. And by the way, I showed this old building, and Harbaugh goes, that's the Bear Claw Coffee in the team meeting. Like, he knew. But it's the Bear Claw Coffee today at that split of what is Washington Stadium today, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it showed up there. These guys in a Cadillac wearing goggles dropped off this jug, and there's photos of the gas station guy holding it. Well, and they bring it to Yost, because who else would know what the jug looks like, right? And Yost goes, yeah, that's it. And of course, they play for that jug for 2 years. And then in 1933, another jug shows up on campus, and everyone universally agrees that the 1933 jug is actually, forget what we said about this jug that the guys in the car dropped off. So that is just a weird story. That's part of you have to kind of sort through that to get to whether the current jug is the real jug. But I think I did, for a few reasons, can date it back before that. So that's some nerdy stuff. But it's cool. We played twice in 1926, including Yost's last game. So there's actually a spot in the jug. I don't know about Seth on your Halloween costume, if you've accounted for this.
It's on my Halloween costume. You can see there's you see how there's one row where there's two of them right there? That's 26.
All right.
So
Send a few photos. I need to have a look and certify this thing. That would be a big seller, I think, too. But we played twice in 1926. Why? Minnesota ran a version of Newt Rockney's offense, which was a shift where guys were kind of moving before the line, before the snap. It was slowly outlawed, but their coach Spears, was a protege of Rockney. So, and no one in the Big Ten would schedule Minnesota. Yost worked it out with Spears that you're not going to run the shift. If you play us, we'll play you. Oh, we need to play another team. We'll play you twice. So we actually played them twice, won both times, including what would be Yost's last game in 1926. That's kind of cool. What else, man? I've got more. I've got a lot more, believe it or not. This is what I do. By the way, you guys, Brian, you've been at this a long time. I mean, it's coming up on 20 years. I had a question. Like, when did Craig Ross join your crew? Because I'm like doing the math in my head, and I'm like, wait a minute. Am I now older than Craig Ross when he started like engaging?
He was about 3,000. No, he was about 2,984. I think.
Okay, because I feel about that. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we did. I think we did our first magazine during the Rodriguez era.
The first magazine was 07. It was before Rich Rod.
All right. See, I'm worried. Sam Webb's going to call me the venerable Greg Dooley soon. I feel like I'm kind of entering that Craig Ross stage with the white. I mean, I'm getting there.
Well, I
With
mean, you're not.
respect.
You got to like start talking about crazy communist stuff before he starts calling you the venerable one. I think.
Okay. The unified string theory of
Yeah.
me. Okay, I got you. I'm getting there. I've got more than just the jug though. So we got a podcast now, Professor and the Pundit. We share a sponsor, Nick Hopwood, who's awesome for just sponsoring folks like us. Love Nick. I'm doing that with Steve Clark, of course, the local longtime Ann Arbor radio host. We started that this year. It's been a ton of fun. And as you guys know, I don't break down. I don't do UFRs. I don't do things like that. It's more stuff off the field. More because I'm teaching an NIL class now at Michigan. It's more stuff like that, more off the field, trends, culture, that kind of thing. So it's been cool. Been a ton of fun.
Yeah, you invited me to talk to the NIL class, and then I looked at the roster of all the people you have in there, and it's just like super famous person, super awesome person, incredible. Like this is the person leading the industry, Seth Fisher, another industry leader. Like,
oh, you mean as far as my
the person in charge of NIL for Michigan? It's like
we have a pretty good list.
Sorely sticks out in that list.
It's been pretty good. It's been a pretty cool class, and I created it in the spring in the School of Ed, and we just launched it without any fanfare. And what happened was a few students signed up for it before the semester, and then word got out, and it's full. So we more than doubled in size. So the classroom's full. It's been cool. It's kind of different. It's obviously different from the history of college athletics in that, like, I literally had to wrap course content around the new NCAA announcements from this week into the class. And it's been fun. It's been fun. It's a lot of work. The students are great.
Anything from the NIL world that's changed since the summer? I mean, you wrote the article about, you wrote 2 articles for us in Hail to Victors this summer about NIL.
Yeah. I mean, if you asked me, like, when I wrote that article, kind of what it seems like the temperature around collectives has kind of changed, where you hear like collectives are starting to avoid that word, I think. And I think they want to be more closer to agents and closer to programs rather than collectives. Even Hale, I think, doesn't like to call itself Hale Impact a collective. Mm-hmm. They got their IRS approval, so that was a big deal. Their 501c3 approval, which is a big deal. We'll see what the impact is on that. And then the NCAA this week came out with what they're proposing as some standardization. I don't know if anything they're doing has any teeth, but around contracts, around transparency of agents and other things like that. We'll see where that goes. I do see everyone I bring in says revenue sharing is inevitable. Okay. And if that happens, oh, by the way, I may have booked our athletic director to come into my history of college athletics class.
Tell
November.
Me it's not the week after I speak.
You're between Ward and Hutch.
Right.
Does that work for you? So we'll see where that goes. But I think if revenue sharing kicks in, I do think the face of what NIL is becomes more of actual marketing deals, actual marketing deals, as opposed to whatever you want to call it now. I think, but that if anything has changed, and I do see Michigan I've seen on social media that Michigan's doing more proactive programs with businesses and athletes and kind of seemingly having more of a strategic role. Michigan, I mean the athletic department, in pushing this forward. Of course, there was a Rosenberg article that had just glowing, in Sports Illustrated, this glowing article of how Michigan's doing it right. And I think when you ask the people on the ground, a lot of them kind of, we have some room to go here, but it seems to be trending in the right direction. So we'll see, man. Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Well, revenue sharing will be interesting because now you have these sort of disparate NIL groups, and it's like who's getting what, nobody really knows. And when revenue sharing comes in, I think that's going to dwarf most of the NIL stuff. So you might see a little bit of a recruiting flattening out a little bit because, it's not going to be, okay, I can get X amount of dollars from Alabama or $0 from somewhere else. It's going to be, I can get X plus 10% from Alabama or X from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you might see guys who would normally be like, all right, I'll go to Alabama, see what happens, go somewhere else where they have more playing time available more immediately. So I think that'll be interesting to track. I mean, it's not like those teams are going to be devoid of talent, but they might not be as stacked as they have been over the past 10 or 15 years.
I agree with your take on that. I think there'll be a base rate for the big schools. I think schools like Rutgers, who have a lot of debt, an alarming amount of debt, are going to be sweating this. But I think the conference will probably have to get together and go, these are the guidelines for how this is going to work. And some of them are going to squeal. Michigan State's going to squeal. I mean, they just canceled their swim dive program.
They might have to pay Mel Tucker $70 million as well.
I think they are going to have to pay Mel Tucker a lot of money.
They canceled their swim and dive program, and then they didn't bring it back after a campaign easily got over the amount of money Michigan State said it would take to bring back the swim and dive team. So
yeah,
honestly, that feels Mel Tucker related.
It could be. I think, look, everyone, Jim Harbaugh's coming out for revenue sharing, Jordan Acker in the New York Times, is Ward going to say something? Because those three groups could actually do something and make a change. Will it happen? I do. Look, I share a lot of your thoughts. I've heard you on Thursdays on TKA here on the conference realignment. Something has to be done for the other sports. Somebody has to step up. And if they don't soon, before next year, I can't see a scenario where some teams don't go, we're not doing it. Or they've already clinched their spot in the postseason and they're like, we're not going to Piscataway, we forfeit. Why? I don't know. We have some players who aren't up for it mentally, physically. We have some sick, we can't do it. And I can only see that happening, but Michigan should be the one that leads the way. And I think I hinted at this in my Hail to the Victors article, but I'd like to see Michigan lead the way here. Santa Ono, the Regents, Jim Harbaugh, Ward Manuel.
I mean, this is what when we talk about what's going on with realignment, what it's all about, this is what it's about. They know that revenue sharing is coming, and you're going to be revenue sharing your contract that, your TV contract is where the money is. Who's getting the bigger TV contracts? The conferences. So if you're in a conference that gets a big TV contract, your players get more. If you're not, your players get less. That's what the game is about right now.
Well, and then the interesting thing is I believe Oregon and Washington are not getting full shares. So
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Their revenue sharing is going to be different than like Northwestern's revenue sharing because their level of revenue is going to be lower. So figuring all this stuff out long term is going to be real difficult because now that we've sort of broken the seal on, okay, we're all in the Big Ten Conference, but we're not all getting the same distribution. Is that going to be tenable long term? It'll be interesting to see. I mean, we've been moving through a period of upheaval in college sports, and it's pretty clear that it's not done yet.
It's not done. And the other thing, as you guys know, Michigan has 29 varsity sports. It's not the same across all these other teams. And so how you do your revenue sharing, how much you have eligible to revenue sharing, what does the rowing team get of revenue sharing? I think there's going to be some discretion for the schools, but they'll probably put caps on the revenue sports about how much you can distribute per athlete. And I wouldn't be surprised if that gives the Washingtons and the Oregons an avenue to fully fund their football players and kind of ease in. I do think also if they do revenue sharing, they will ease in those maxes over time to allow Rutgers to figure out how they're getting out of this hole or whatever situation. So
figure out how to get rid of Rutgers.
I think, and then there's that, we did talk about, the whole notion of the English Premier, as I was corrected by my British graduate assistant.
Unless you call it Mexico, you can call it the Premier League.
There you go. Right.
You're an American.
Thank you. That whole notion and what are the pros and cons, for leagues out west to do that, especially the Pac-2 and Mountain West, and interesting stuff. But it's not, so to my point, these are all things I talk about in my NIL class. Well, why? That's not directly in NIL. Well, everything we're talking about here, including the transfer portal, including revenue sharing, conference, this all has an impact on player equity, player compensation, and other issues around in NLRB suits. All of this has an issue, and to me, that's really what the class is about. And it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been a ton of fun.
All right. Well, if you're a Michigan student, look out for that next semester. And it's been great having you, Dooley. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Yeah, we got to get together soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. See you.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Pete Cavarilla, owner of Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. We've been servicing Ann Arbor and Metro Detroit for over 40 years, and we know that the last thing you want to worry about is your heating and cooling system breaking down. Right now is a good time to sign up for our preventative maintenance plan, so you don't have to worry about it in November when the fourth quarters get interesting. Our maintenance members also get discounts on service calls, and you can rest assured our team plays tough in sun or snow and have never been called soft by Lou Holtz. Whether you need a tune-up, are ready for a new system, or want to upgrade your air quality before winter, call us anytime or schedule an appointment on our website at sharonsheating.com.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing a home simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
1 and 2 and...
If you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, you want a Michigan man in the huddle. Call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul at 248-924-9458 or visit his website at michiganlawgrad.com. John is a proud graduate of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business and Michigan Law School. And he looks forward to showing you the Michigan difference.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with Signalwire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. Signalwire is optimized for high-quality and low-latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
Signalwire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
Yeah, I know this is practice. I treat it like a scrimmage. Yeah, it costs to be the boss, and that shit get expensive. Either you a MJ or you a Scottie Pippen. Can I get an amen? Can I get a witness? I know I'ma make it out and scratch my lotto ticket. Hey, I'ma go the distance.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 9.5. Thank you to Kyle Mack for the music for this episode. Our final segment, we will turn our attention to the UFRs. One last look back at the Nebraska game. Takes we had coming out of a dominant performance. I don't think I'm telling anybody anything, and they don't know when I say that J.J. McCarthy's performance was pretty good. I had him as a plus 13 on 16 throws, which is solid.
I have now forgotten the Bowling Green game entirely.
Good. That's good, especially because one of the conversations we had after the Bowling Green game is whether J.J. McCarthy should throw while rolling away from his throwing arm, and I think the answer is yes.
Well, I don't know if you recall anything from that, but I was on your side. I was the only one on your side on that one. Sam was against us. David was against us.
No. Devin Gardner was also on our side. So.
Okay.
But I think everybody is going to be curious about the performance of Ladarius Henderson, his first start at left tackle. I had him at plus 5.5, plus 7.5, -2. Those minuses were both on the last drive where any of the starters were in. So, I thought that was a very solid performance on the ground against a team that was very tricky. So the thing that really leapt out to me about the Nebraska defense is how much they stunted. It was pretty much every play.
Mm-hmm.
And to pick all those things up, I mean, he's got a lot of experience as a college lineman, but he's in a new system. He's at a new school. I thought he had a pretty excellent performance mentally. Pass protection, there were two major incidents. One was the pass pro breakdown that led to the Wilson touchdown. I kind of hemmed and hawed about it. I did think that it's possible that he's playing more to the outside because he expects Keegan to be able to help. But Keegan can't help because Hutmacher is also coming to him, and he gets beat real quick, so I did make that a -2. The other one where JJ gets lit up, I charged that to Blake Corum. Because Blake Corum runs into him as he's trying to mirror a stunt, and I feel like if he gets that extra step, he wins that block. So I think, in my opinion, that the tackle battle should be over.
Yeah.
And this should be the line going forward. Because one thing that Henderson has done in his last 3 or 4 games is he's demonstrated that he does not make big errors. If he makes an error, sometimes the line will get reset on him. He'll get shoved back a yard. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't completely fall over and have a -2. That was, and I think in the context of this offense, that's what you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just want Michigan to be able to grind down the field consistently and then hit over the top. One other thing, which is kind of a negative, which definitely a negative, is that there were a couple moments where Blake Corum broke into the open field and it felt like 22 Blake Corum dusts the safety, makes it 30 yards. That didn't happen in this game. So I went back and I looked at the Pro Football Focus numbers. His missed tackle rate last year was about 29%. On 29% of his carries, he was forcing a missed tackle, and that is 12% this year. So I had been talking about how Blake feels like he's all the way back. It now doesn't feel like he's all the way back to me. It feels like he hasn't quite got back to the point where if you meet the safety in the open field, that's only ending one way. And
yeah, I mean, there was one in this game where I think that the safety met him, and then he had the pursuit was coming from behind him on his right, and he cuts right, and the pursuit kind of gets to him, and it was like
I mean, that was the play I embedded about that, but it felt like last year he would have danced that safety into the ground, hopped left, and taken off. So that's something to watch, and I think it might be something that improves over the course of the year because the kind of injury he had doesn't feel like the kind of injury that's going to permanently sap you, right? It wasn't a ligament, it was a patella kneecap kind of thing. So it feels like he's just kind of working his way into it and will be fine down the road. The other thing that I liked is that Michigan ran JJ McCarthy on the second play of the game, and they benefited from that on 3 or 4 plays down the road. And last year, I harped on this constantly about how Michigan did not.
We've been talking about it. We've been talking about it for years. Ever since Harbaugh came, we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like a lot of the frustrations I had with last year's offense have been fixed. So their red zone is more creative right now. They don't need to throw the ball. They can run the ball into the end zone. But instead of running a dive 5 straight times against Rutgers and having it stuffed until 4th down until you barely get in, they're combining dives and belly plays. And there was a power on the goal line that was a walk-in. I'm sure they'll have down G. You might even see a stretch down at the goal line. They've changed what they do sufficiently so that they're really, really efficient down there, despite the fact that I think this offensive line probably isn't as good as last year's offensive line. Because I think Nugent isn't Olu. He's fine, but he's not Olu.
Yeah, that was the question I have for you, and I think it's because he maybe, in the process of reading your UFR, he had like a -2 and then a -1 2 plays later, and it was like, it felt like those were stacking up.
Well, yeah, he came in with a -2 for the game, and there were 3 -2 events, one of which was a stunt that he didn't pick up, on a power play, which might have been harsh. It happened so quickly that I mean, I RPS that play, and maybe I should have just left it as RPS because, Michigan pulls a guy, and then Henderson, the defensive end is lined up inside to Henderson and just shoots the gap immediately. Henderson has no chance. And then who's going to pick up that slack? Well, it's got to be Nugent. Nugent wasn't quick enough to do it, but that's very difficult. And then he was the guy who had to go up against Hutmacher on 101 blocks. And I think that guy's the real deal. So, he got pushed in the backfield, and Hutmacher was able to shed and tackle for no gain. And that's always going to be a minus too. So I kind of feel like he has some limitations. And I think a guy like Hutmacher exposed them. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the most powerful guy, but he is a plus player. And I don't want to read too much into some grading that didn't turn out well because he had a couple of bad events. I think he's a solid player, and sometimes my grading just kind of turns out like this. There's a guy on 24/7 who also grades OL stuff, and his grade for Nugent in this grade was super high, and his grade for Henderson in this game was super low. And I'm just like, it's hard. Grading OL is hard.
I know. You know what? It's been weird for me, just to get a little meta for a second, because I got to do the offense for a year, and then you came back and did. Now I'm reading your UFRs, having graded these same players. Like, I graded Zinter for a year, and now I'm watching you grade the same things that Zinter does, and it's kind of, you get on a streak sometimes when you're doing this, right? Where you're like, oh, that guy screwed up, and then you're kind of like, I don't know, watching him for the same mess up or something. You kind of keep on checking your bias all the time, because you always have to kind of you have to question yourself. And I think I changed my mind on those things. And with offensive line especially, I think I would change my mind 2 or 3 times every time I'd grade a play in the process of grading the play.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And sometimes, even after I've completed the UFR and I've pasted it into the live writer and I'm inserting a clip and I watch the clip, sometimes I change my opinion of the play watching the clip again.
Yeah.
So I can understand why people come up with different numbers, and I'm not trying to ding this guy on 24/7 who I think does a great job. I just want to emphasize that over a long period of time, I think you can figure out things about players, but if you just look at a 1-game sample, especially on the offensive line, you're going to sometimes get some outliers. And I feel like Nugent's game was an outlier.
Okay.
But when you have Zinter, who's just grading out incredibly every game, no matter what, then you kind of know.
Yeah.
And the thing in this game was there was a play where Nebraska was stunting and Hutmacher goes right into Zinter. Zinter stalls him out and then moves him.
Mm-hmm.
That's something Nugent couldn't do. I don't know if Keegan could do it.
Yeah.
It was extremely impressive. And if Nugent hadn't completely obliterated Hutmacher on the flea flicker, that would have been our block of the week. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of overall how I feel about this offense, I'm really happy with all of the changes from last year. And one of the more interesting things that we saw in this game were a couple of plays where JJ didn't keep the ball, but there were tight ends flaring out to give him a convoy if he kept the ball. And I kind of feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface of what Michigan has prepared there. And we're going to see a little bit more of it this week, a little bit more of it next week. We're going to have 4 or 5 different plays from all these formations on film. And then when we get to crunch time in this season, Michigan is going to be able to run those plays and also plays that play off those plays in a way that hopefully shows Manny Diaz his intestines again.
Well,
if you're go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you're drafting, pieces to give to a Harbaugh offense, the amount of tight ends he has, and I know this goes into a different direction that you wanted to go with Manny Diaz, but the number of tight ends that he has who can make a block or, completely unhinge the defense by what they can do, and I'm including Max Bredesen in this as well, obviously, is, with Harbaugh, that's just a superpower.
Yeah, it is. What did you see on the defense?
Well, not a lot of guys got a lot of snaps. I think like on the defensive line, the most snaps was Jalen Harrell with 27 in the game. And Chris Jenkins only had 26. So the numbers, nobody except for Braden McGregor ended up over plus 10. But when I added them all together, the defensive line again was a plus 50. And like when I get those kinds of numbers, where you can see the distribution of where the activity is happening, and the distribution was heavily slanted towards the defensive line. The activity is still happening up front.
So what was you got plus 50. What was the minus total?
The minus total was 17.
Yeah.
And 9 of those were Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart, mostly on the slants, mostly in coverage.
Okay, yeah, we should clarify that.
Yeah.
So it's really plus 50, minus 8 on the ground.
Yeah,
which
plus,
is nuts.
Right. It's like it's they're just destroying him on the ground, and even without Mason Graham, who was probably grading out better than even Jenkins. This game, like you pointed out, Jenkins wasn't getting blocked. They were mostly just running away from him. There were a couple times where I noticed they were optioning him.
And it still didn't work.
It still doesn't. Yeah, they can't get him to stay put. And that blows up everything else they want to do, because if Michigan runs a stunt, they're trying to get 2 guys on Chris Jenkins, which means they're not paying attention to the guy on Kenneth Grant. They actually tried a trap in this game. A trap is where you like pull a guard and let a tackle run upfield, and then you kind of like slam into the guard, and then you run a gap, right? And they tried to do that, and Michigan was just moving guys around. All of a sudden, Kenneth Grant is just standing it was Rayshon Benny is just standing in there, because like you have to pay so much attention when a guy goes upfield. They can't. There's just no way to keep control of the guy. And he does fight back, and he actually affects that play. And then some of the pluses there are just beating up on Corcoran, who was like the turnstile of a tackle they had. And then Corcoran gets hurt in this game, so now it's like this true freshman who was behind Corcoran. And that was the guy who Stewart gets one on him, Harrell got one on him, although he got held and they didn't call it, and Moore got him for one as well. So everybody and McGregor got one on Corcoran. So everybody got at least like one sack like event on that guy. Derek Moore was also doing it to Bryce Benhart on the other side. Bryce Benhart is the average Big Ten tackle. Pretty big guy, and Moore just gets his shoulder so low that it's like that's going to work against everybody. And like, that was the guy who stood out. McGregor had a fantastic game. I don't want to take anything away from him. But, Moore's game was the one, aside from his zone drops, which, how important is a defensive end's zone drops. He's the one who's like really sticking out to me.
Yeah. Secondary concerns?
Have them. I have them. Samer still got a little hurt in this game, so they were, trying out different guys at nickel. Rod Moore was fine. I think that there's been like, just because he's not on screen so much, there's like developing a slow like, where's Rod Moore this year thing. Anytime he got a chance to do something, he did it. He didn't have any +2s that I clipped, but he was like just doing his, he was doing pepper stuff from the nickel position, which is, that's what you want out of him. When he was playing safety, they didn't throw at him. Makari Page was just kind of boring. Quentin Johnson was kind of responsible after the true freshman gets blown out on their touchdown. Johnson is in position and doesn't make the tackle, which is a little nerve-wracking if we have to go back to him at safety. And Keon Sabb, I thought, was the one who was responsible on the other really long pass play they had, which Johnson is supposed to be next to the guy. So there's only 2 guys in that route. And one of them gets completely taken out by Makari Page. There's only one guy to be worried about. And Josh Wallace has the opportunity to kind of see that no one's attacking his side of the field and get over there, because he does still have help underneath him. And he doesn't do anything. He doesn't get over to that play. Will Johnson is supposed to stick with that guy. He's got about 10 yards of cushion when that ball is in the air. And then Keon Sabb is like playing it really soft and giving up an extra 5 yards, and he's 5 yards away from the guy when he makes the catch. And it's like, one of you guys has to be there on the idea of bracketing a guy is that 2 people are near a guy, not nobody.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of concern that wasn't the only time Will Johnson got beat crispy. There was another slant where actually, it gets knocked down by Quentin Johnson, who's coming down on a blitz and stops and makes a good play on it. But, it's kind of something I'm keeping an eye on now. I took his star off. I don't think anybody noticed. But.
Well, maybe it's time to get that Scion fired up. All right, guys. We'll see you. I guess we go see us on Monday for the Monday podcast.
Yep. All right.
She makes a ruska, vodka, singing this crazy song. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. Boris is a mayor and a land surveyor with plans of his own. He hates a ruska, he hates a vodka.